Hi everybody, I'm Ryan, and today we're going to talk about nuances in the Jund Sacrifice deck in Pioneer. There's a lot of weird things going on with this deck, and if you're wondering how this deck works as a whole, I did a deck tech on it that was posted at some point a few weeks ago, so make sure you check that out. These are weird play patterns and nuances that are important to know that I'm sort of going to throw at you with the Jund Sacrifice deck, so let's do it. First off, let's talk about how the Yigra combo actually works. So what you're trying to do is make sure you have a Yigra on the battlefield in either a food or a Cauldron Familiar and another Cauldron Familiar in the graveyard. And because Yigra makes other creatures food, what you can do is sacrifice that food or other Cauldron Familiar to the Cauldron Familiar in the graveyard, bring it back, you gain one, your opponent loses one. That new Cauldron Familiar on the battlefield is a food, so you can take the Cauldron Familiar that's in the graveyard now, sacrifice the Cauldron Familiar on the battlefield, you gain one, your opponent loses one. Now there's another Cauldron Familiar in the graveyard, and do that over and over and over until your opponent dies. That's the basics of the combo. There's a lot of ways to get there, mostly alongside Scavenger's Talent, because Scavenger Talent allows you to sacrifice things and then self-mill to be able to get those cats and eventually a Yigra in the graveyard. And it's okay if the Yigra hits the graveyard because we can use Scavenger's Talent's third ability to sack all the crazy artifacts and permanents that we have to just bring Yigra back and then do the combo because we've milled ourselves a whole bunch. Scavenger's Talent also has a couple other really interesting nuances with it where we can chump with cats effectively indefinitely because we get a food whenever a creature dies. And so our opponent attacks with a big creature, we chump with our 1/1, it dies, we get a food because we trigger Scavenger's Talent, and then on our opponent's end step, we just bring back the cat by sacrificing the food that was created when the cat died. There's a couple other more obvious ones that aren't centered around these newish cards. Mayhem Devil, remember it triggers on your opponent's sacrificing things as well. So this is your opponent's treasures is probably the most common one, food, whatever. So make sure you remember that. It's really hard to remember those triggers in Paper. And the way you always want to play Claim the Firstborn is by stealing something your opponent has and then sacrificing it. You don't really want to be playing Claim the Firstborn unless your opponent's just dead. If you're just if it's just an act of treason. So you want to Claim the Firstborn, jam with the creature, and then sacrifice it to either a Witch's Oven or a Deadly Dispute. And then the last sort of play pattern nuance that I wanted to go over is stacking Kroxa triggers properly. So most of the time, stacking the triggers don't really matter. Remember that you can sacrifice the creature before it is sacrificed to its I guess trigger to Deadly Dispute or Witch's Oven before that trigger actually resolves. So you can get a little extra value out of it. But also if you're afraid your opponent has instant speed graveyard hate, if you stack the Kroxa triggers so that the discard happens first and then the sacrifice happens, the way the game sort of works in the background is your opponent does a discard thing, cool, the sacrifice, the only thing on the stack, that resolves. But the thing is, when the stack is clear, the active player is the first one that gets priority. So when that resolves, Kroxa's in the graveyard because it was sacrificed. And then you as the active player have priority, so you can immediately escape it if you have the mana, and your opponent has no opportunity to exile Kroxa while it's in the graveyard. So that's a really, really important nuance that comes up more than you would think. But those are most of the play patterns and nuances that I don't believe I went over in the deck tech. If you liked this video and want to see more videos like this, please be sure to like and subscribe. Check me out on social media. Links are above me and in the description. As always, thank you so much for watching. I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.